Representative Helm, how do you vote? Helm votes aye. Representative Wilson votes aye. Representative Smith Warner, how do you vote? Smith Warner votes aye. Representative Springer votes aye. House Bill 2129A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Final reading, memorials and resolutions. The clerk will read the first resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 37, commending Mount Hood Community College and Sandy River Watershed Council for improving fish habitat.
Question now rises upon final reading and consideration of HCR 37. Representative Gorsuch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I truly appreciate the opportunity to rise in support of House Concurrent Resolution 37. HCR 37 comes to the floor from the House Committee on Rules with unanimous approval. The focus of this resolution is to recognize the contributions of both my college, Mount Hood Community College, and our local Sandy River Watershed Council with HCR 37 for the work that they've done on improving fish habitat in my community. With the help and guidance of the Sandy River Watershed Council, which is one of many councils across the state, Mount Hood Community College was the nation's first community college to be certified salmon safe in 2016. This designation was the result of the development of a 5-year plan that is currently being implemented that identified a range of retrofits and changes to buildings, parking lots, and other structures on campus to intercept and clean up stormwater drainage. Runoff from the developed parts of the campus leads to the warming and pollution of water draining into 2 Sandy River tributaries, Kelly and Beaver Creeks, both of which run across the campus. The Sandy River Watershed Council is a key partner in the project, along with East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District, the City of Gresham, Metro, Salmon Safe Partner Network, and the Spirit Mountain Community Fund. The current project involves the addition of bioswales and rain gardens on the west side of the campus. Those projects being worked on by the council will catch and clean about 2 million gallons of stormwater runoff every year from the campus. It will also remove about 1,600 pounds of pollutants annually. This project will complement the recent work of the replacement of a culvert under Southeast Stark Street by Multnomah County. All of these things will improve habitat in both Kelly and Beaver Creek, which is a plus not only for those small creeks, but also for the Sandy River itself. Mount Hood Community College and the Sandy River Watershed Council deserve high praise for this unprecedented collaboration to improve our community and the world we live in. Colleagues, I ask you to join me in supporting this effort, and I urge and I vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion of the resolution? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? He does not. Those of the opinion that HCR 37 should be adopted will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Reschke, how do you vote? Reschke votes aye. Wallen votes aye. Representative Alonzo Leon, how do you vote? Representative Hernandez. HCR 37, excuse me, HCR 37, having received the required majority, is declared adopted. Clerk will read the next resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 25, declaring legislative support for survivors of sexual violence.
Question now arises upon final reading and consideration of SCR 25A. Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I am humbled to bring you Senate Concurrent Resolution 25 today. This SCR comes from the work of multiple legislative staffers who have survived the experience of sexual violence in their lives. While we know that for the individuals who have survived these experiences, there's ongoing trauma that comes with having to report these incidents. Throughout our history, too many have had to face ridicule, embarrassment, and even rejection over reporting what happened to them. As a society, we are coming to terms with our failings in properly protecting these individuals and ensuring that they have a safe, supportive environment in which to come forward. We must ensure, as we continue to change laws and even make changes to this institution, that we are building and encouraging institutions that are supportive of survivors and finding justice, whatever that justice may mean to them. We must make sure that individuals feel safe to report what happened to them, and we must learn from our mistakes in the past. SCR 25 declares legislative support for survivors of sexual violence and pledges to work towards creating an Oregon that is safe for all survivors of sexual violence. It advocates for paid time off and protection against discrimination for sexual assault survivors and outlines a number of practices that should be followed by law enforcement, the courts, and employers in order to treat survivors in a trauma-informed manner. Colleagues, I urge your support for this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Smith Warner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues,
To the resolution?
To the resolution.
To the resolution.
Colleagues, I rise to urge your support of this resolution and to just briefly call out and thank the many staff all over this building who were involved in the drafting and the moving forward of this resolution, particularly Emily Henderson from Senator Dembro's office, who gave courageous testimony before the House Rules Committee, and I know has been involved in this every step of the way, working quietly and diligently to make sure that this moved forward through the process. So I just wanted to call out her and the other staff, members of the Survivors Caucus, and everyone for whom this reflects an important truth and their own courage in moving past that and letting their survivor, letting them as a survivor define them and not their victimhood. So for that, I please urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Williamson, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I too want to join the representative from Northeast Portland to thank the brave legislative staff who have worked so hard this session in bringing this resolution forward and in working so hard to make Oregon a better place for everyone. Their work is making our institution safer for survivors to report sexual violence. And colleagues, I ask you today to pledge with me to join in working to create an Oregon that is safe for survivors of sexual violence. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion that SCR 25A should be adopted will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Wallen, how do you vote? Wallen votes aye. Representative Bosshard Davis votes aye. SCR 25A, having received the required majority, is declared adopted. Bills, reports, and other business lying on the table. First reading of Senate bills. Committee reports. Committee reports files numbers 212 and 213 have been distributed. Second reading of Senate bills.
Senate Bill 5510 relating to the financial administration of the State Department of Fish and Wildlife and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 5530 relating to the financial administration of the Department of State Police and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 5537 relating to the financial administration of the Teacher Standards and Practices Commission and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 5538 relating to the financial administration of the Department of Veterans Affairs and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 22 relating to behavioral health homes. Senate Bill 23 relating to data submitted to the Oregon Health Authority by healthcare facilities. Senate Bill 41 relating to oil spill prevention fees and prescribing effective date. Senate Bill 98 relating to renewable natural gas and prescribing effective date. Senate Bill 138 relating to prescription drug coverage and publicly financed programs and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 283 relating to exposure to radiation in schools in the state and declaring an emergency.
Bills
Senate
read
Bill 372. Senate Bill 372 relating to notification of parties with interest in towed vehicles and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 491 relating to housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. Senate Bill 526 relating to home visiting and prescribing an effective date. Senate Bill 577 relating to bias crimes and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 832 relating to child fatalities and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 884 relating to water pollution control revolving fund and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 889 relating to containing the cost of health care and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 973 relating to behavioral health and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 1013 relating to murder and prescribing an effective date. Senate Bill 1051 relating to mitigating fuel costs and prescribing an effective date. Senate Bill 1052 relating to government oversight.
Bills read second time are passed to third reading. Third reading of Senate bills. The clerk will read the first Senate bill.
Senate Bill 809 relating to determining the fitness of individuals to provide care using public funds.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 809A. Representative Gorsuch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of Senate Bill 809 this morning. SB 809 comes to the floor from the House Committee on Rules with a due pass recommendation. Indeed, it has gained unanimous approval at every point in the legislative process to this point. Senate Bill 809A is a bill that clarifies the due process requirements for DHS and OHA regarding how they include substantiated abuse in their fitness for duty determinations. Currently, the standards and exactly how they weigh this information is not outlined in rules, leaving a process that can be subjective and uneven in cases that are substantively the same. The bill also allows for a contested case hearing should an individual decide to challenge the determination. That contested case hearing does not affect the original substantiation, only the fitness for duty determination. The list of disqualifying crimes does not change or affect how those are included in the process. So essentially, this is a way for workers in the field to gain a better understanding of the process and to provide a means to understand and appreciate potential outcomes. Colleagues, this is an important measure that clarifies and provides essential guidance for due process, and I urge an aye vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Senate Bill 809A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1002 relating to sentencing.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 1002B. Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, since 2013, this body has been working to reform our criminal justice system using evidence-based practices to reduce recidivism and to keep our communities safer. This bill, Senate Bill 1002, is the next step in a conversation we actually started last session about plea bargains and how we can make our system more effective and responsive by putting tools back in the hands of our corrections and parole and probation staff to properly manage the people that they are responsible for. Last Thursday, you received on your desk letters from the Department of Corrections and the Association of Community Corrections Directors reinforcing this. It's vital for them to be able to manage people who are in their custody or who are transitioning back into the community, and that they be able to reward good behavior in order to guide positive progress. However, it's a common practice for district attorneys to require defendants to waive access to some or all programs as a condition of receiving a plea deal. These waivers can include programming like drug and alcohol treatment or other evidence-based practices. What we know from statistics is between 94 and 96% of cases in our criminal justice system are resolved by plea agreements. 96% of our cases, colleagues, do not go to trial. They are resolved by plea agreements. So a decision made by a prosecutor at the very beginning of a criminal process ends up tying the hands of law enforcement professionals throughout the rest of the process, professionals who are in a far better position to know what programs are and are not appropriate for a given person, and who are responsible for those adults in custody years after the district attorney is out of the picture. Senate Bill 1002 prohibits prosecuting attorneys from requiring waiver of these programs as a condition of a plea agreement. Programs that cannot be waived under Senate Bill 1002 include transitional leave, good time, earned time, and programs under the supervision of community corrections. The letters, like I said, you received last Thursday are from the agencies, and they speak to the effectiveness of these programs and their effectiveness in managing and rehabilitating those within our criminal justice system. Colleagues, as we work to reform our criminal justice system in Oregon, we have to do so with a lens towards creating a system that is just and fair for everyone. I think accepting a plea bargain should not mean accepting unequal or an unfair system of justice. I urge and I vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion that the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Senate Bill 1002B, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 5502, relating to the financial administration of the Oregon Department of Administrative Services and declaring an emergency.
Representative Smith. Representative Smith, you're up next. Sorry. Question now arises upon the reading and final passage of Senate Bill 5502A. Representative Smith.
I'm right on top of it, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I apologize for the delay, but the good news is...
It's the freshman.
Yeah. But the good news is I'm bringing you forward the DAS budget. So Senate Bill 5502 is the budget bill for the Department of Administrative Services. The department supports other state agencies by delivering centralized services, which include motor pool, information technology support and oversight, statewide accounting, risk insurance, facilities management, and procurement. Colleagues, some might argue that DAS is the heart of state government. The department also provides management oversight and policy direction to state agencies on operations, finance, human resources, and information technology. Colleagues, the budget for the department totals just under $1.15 billion and includes 914 positions, which is 5% below the 2017-19 legislatively approved budget. This is a compliment to the director of the department, Madam Speaker. Other fund reductions totaling $15.7 million include, but are not limited to, increased vacancy savings, cuts to services and supplies and professional services that they were able to adjust to, reduced service provision, and the elimination of 9 unneeded vacant positions. Colleagues, major other fund expenditure limitation increases include $13.6 million for IT security compliance, $9.4 million for implementation of a new statewide procurement system, $15.3 million to replace equipment at the state data center that has passed its useful life, and $5.4 million to start planning for the replacement of the Oregon State payroll system. The budget also includes 6 budget notes, 5 of which are related to information technology projects. Colleagues, I would share with you your Subcommittee on General Government thoroughly went through the budget of the Department of Administrative Services and is pleased to bring it forward to you with a recommendation for an aye vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Neerman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
So the Department of Administrative Services oversees the human resources for the state of Oregon. And one of the decisions that was made was to continue to take pay out of workers' paychecks that are seeking to opt out of their union membership in accordance with the Janus decision that was handed down last year. I disagree with the Department of Administrative Services decision to do that, which was based on their opinion from the Justice Department. And I think that at the end of the day, the state of Oregon is going to owe a lot of people a lot of money. And so I'm urging a no vote on this, and I urge the Department of Administrative Services, and for that matter, the Justice Department, to reconsider their action on that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Smith, would you like to close?
Just very briefly, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, what was just shared by the good representative is a great conversation for perhaps the Rules Committee. What I can share with you is your Joint Committee on Ways and Means Subcommittee on General Government looks at the budget issues within this agency, and they're running a tight ship, and I would recommend an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Senate Bill 5502A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 5503, relating to the financial administration of the Commission for the Blind and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 5503A. Representative Stark.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 5503 is the budget bill for the Oregon Commission for the Blind. The agency's programs are focused on two main objectives: employment and independence for Oregonians who are blind or visually impaired. The agency provides employment and technology services, training, supportive employment programs, and small business opportunities. I encourage an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Reardon, how do you vote? Reardon votes aye. Senate Bill 5503A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 5506, relating to the financial administration of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 5506A. Representative Stark.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 5506 is the budget bill for the Criminal Justice Commission. The CJC is a small agency with many responsibilities. Among other things, it administers Oregon's felony sentencing guidelines, analyzes crime trends and sentencing policy data, and administers several competitive grant programs, including Oregon's Justice Reinvestment Initiative. I encourage an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative McEwen votes aye. Representative Clem, how do you vote? Clem votes aye. Representative Wilson votes aye. Representative Kenny Geyer, how do you vote? Kenny Geyer votes aye. Representative Helt, how do you vote? Representative Helt, how do you vote? Health votes aye. Representative Barretto, how do you vote? Barretto votes aye. And Noble. Representative Noble votes aye. Senate Bill 5506A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 5520, relating to the financial administration of the long-term care ombudsman and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 5520A. Representative Noes.
Just a second, Madam Speaker. Sorry about that. I was preparing for another bill. Madam Speaker, Senate Bill 5520 is the budget bill for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman. The Long-Term Care Ombudsman is an agency that recruits and trains local volunteers to help this agency identify, investigate, and resolve non-abuse complaints made by or on behalf of residents in long-term care facilities in our state. It's also responsible for providing public guardian and conservatorship services to individuals who do not have relatives or friends or family who are able to assume those duties. The Full Ways and Means Committee approved a total budget of $8.1 million, including $7.2 million general fund and 26.5 full-time equivalent positions. This budget is a 10.4% increase from 2017-2019's legislatively approved budget and includes the roll-up costs for 2 positions in the Oregon Public Guardian Program that were approved in the 2018 session. This is a good watchdog program that is widely supported with minimal staffing, leads a committed group of volunteers statewide who really help keep people safe and happy in long-term care. And that is the end of my speech, Madam Speaker, and please vote yes.
Thank you, Representative. For the discussion, Representative Wilde.
Madam Speaker, I do urge an aye vote on this. I did want to bring attention to the fact that we are critically underfunding the Office of the Public Guardian. My concern is that we are essentially advertising a service that we are not providing. It is so critically underfunded that it cannot possibly do all the things we've asked of it, and I hope my colleagues will in future sessions remember that if we are really going to provide this service, we really need to fund it. Thank you, and I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. For the discussion, Representative McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to make sure that everyone understands what an important office this is. We have a lot of elders who are in long-term care who have no advocates, and the ombudsman visits are really critical in making sure that we are providing the best care we possibly can. And I just want to make sure that we're giving a shout out to every single volunteer and the director of this office, because it is such a really important piece of protecting the other end of our most vulnerable population. We have our children, we have our vulnerable elders, and this is just a really important vote to take, and I would appreciate a yes vote as well.
Thank you, Representative. For the discussion. Seeing none, Representative Noes, would you like to close?
Not really, Madam Speaker, only just to say that Representative Wilde and Representative McEwen did a pretty good job of giving a shout out for this agency.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion that the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Helt, how do you vote? Helt votes yes. Senate Bill 5520A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 5524, relating to the financial administration of the Oregon Business Development Department and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 5524A. Representative Post.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am beyond excited. This is my first budget bill as a member of a Ways and Means Committee, so this is a special moment. I hope everybody's taking pictures and recording. SB 5524 is the budget bill for the Oregon Business Development Department. The department implements the state's economic development strategy and administers programs that aid business and communities. This budget also includes funding for the Arts Commission, Cultural Trust, Oregon Film and Video Office. The department's budget totals $817.9 million, including $61.5 million general fund, $118.1 million lottery funds, $349.7 million other funds, $43.1 million federal funds, $245.5 million other funds non-limited, and 135 positions. The budget is a 2.1 decrease from the 2017-19 legislative approved budget and includes $2.5 million in general fund and lottery funds reductions, as well as other funds decreases to align limitation with anticipated expenditures. Notice that was decreases. Lottery funds support of $629,199 for the Oregon Growth Fund to increase capital available to the state's early stage business, and $750,000 for the Rural Opportunity Initiative grant program was approved. I'll just skip down to the bottom. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of Senate Bill 5524 as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, Representative Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I need to declare a conflict of interest.
Please declare your potential conflict of interest.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I was always trained to follow a certain protocol, and that's what I've done for 10 terms. But I realized perhaps not only should I follow the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. So, Madam Speaker, I would share with you I'm a member of a limited liability company that does economic and business development throughout the state of Oregon. And within Business Oregon, there's times where I probably refer 20 to 30 businesses to the department. I gain nothing financially to their entrepreneurial development loan fund, trying to help businesses access capital. Quite often, colleagues, I work with the business and regional development officers on general economic development issues throughout Eastern Oregon and in Lynn County. There's times where I've met with Business Oregon representatives at trade shows where we coordinate to try and bring business to the state of Oregon, not only for Eastern Oregon, but throughout the entire state. None of those activities are paid for through Business Oregon or through your tax dollars. I also want to share that at times I support the ports division within Business Oregon. Colleagues, I have 5 ports in District 57. And then finally, I'd share with you that I'm the director of the Eastern Oregon University Small Business Development Center, where 1/3 of the funding, approximately, my number's not exact, Madam Speaker, but approximately $45,000 is paid for through Business Oregon. Colleagues, I'd share with you, I have an excellent staff person that makes over $50,000 a year. It's important to me to pay my people professional wages. And I also employ at about, I think, $13 an hour for interns that we turn loose in the community to support small business. I make less than 30% off of that contract. Madam Speaker, I know that's way more than anyone wants to know, but I'm open. I've always tried to be transparent, and anytime any of you have a question, don't hesitate to ask. Madam Speaker, to the bill.
Thank you, Representative. And make sure that you submit in writing all of what you see as potential conflicts. So, to the bill.
I think my staff's going to shoot me on that. Colleagues, I'd share with you very quickly that Business Oregon provides a valuable service throughout rural Eastern Oregon, and they've been a valuable partner not only with the folks I work with, but with all of the 100 or so economic development professionals throughout the state. Kudos go out to them for the good work, and thank you to the good representative for bringing this bill forward.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none. Representative Post, would you like to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Greenlake, how do you vote? Greenlake votes yes. Representative Drazen, how do you vote? Drazen votes aye. Senate Bill 5524A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 5528, relating to the financial administration of the State Board of Parole and Post-Prison Supervision and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of House Bill 5528A. Representative Peluso.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 5528 is the budget bill for the Board of Parole and Post-Prison Supervision. The board protects the public and reduces the risk of repeat criminal behavior by managing decisions about incarceration and evidence-based community supervision. The board classifies sex offenders to a notification level and determines whether they are qualified to be reclassified or taken off the registry. The board also partners with the Department of Corrections using evidence-based supervision and intervention methods and assists with training and community education efforts. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means approved a total budget of $8,793,404. This funding level is a decrease of 2.9% from 2017 to the 19 legislatively approved budget. The budget includes $8,781,722 general fund and $11,682 other funds and 25 positions. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of Senate Bill 5528 as amended.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close?
No.
She does not. Those of the opinion the bill shall pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Fahey, how do you vote? Fahey votes aye. Representative Helt, how do you vote? Helt votes aye. Senate Bill 5528A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 5531, relating to the financial administration of the Psychiatric Security Review Board and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 5531A. Representative Noose.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 5531 is the budget bill for the Psychiatric Security Review Board. The Psychiatric Security Review Board's primary mission is to ensure the safety of the public by supervising the progress and placement of individuals found guilty of a crime except for reason of insanity. The board is also responsible for processing relief petitions and hearing from persons barred from possession of a firearm due to a mental health determination. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means approved a budget of $3.2 million, all general fund. This budget supports 11 full-time positions whose jobs are to deliberate and make these determinations. We are funding the board at its current service level. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means has recommended approval of Senate Bill 5531 as amended, and so do I. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Noose, how do you vote? Noose votes aye. House Bill 5531A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 27, relating to Oregon Drinking Water Quality Act fees.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 27B. Representative Skelton.
Madam Speaker, colleagues, SB 27 restructures the schedule of fees paid by water suppliers to support the regulation of public drinking water systems by the Oregon Health Authority. Currently, OHA is authorized to adopt rules to establish fees to support the cost of conducting periodic sanitary surveys. The bill replaces this fee with the authority to establish annual regulatory fees based on the size and type of water system. The change in fee structure is expected to increase fee revenue by $1.8 million in the 2019-21 biennium. OHA would use the increased revenue to support 5 additional positions to improve its ability to adequately monitor the safety of Oregon's drinking water and respond to detections of contaminants. The additional revenue would also increase support for local public health authorities who perform drinking water safety inspections. The amendment establishes an emergency clause with an effective date of July 1, 2019. The Joint Ways and Means recommends approval of SB 27 as amended.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Help votes no. Representative Bossard Davis, how do you vote? Bossard Davis votes no. Senate Bill 27B, having received the excuse me one moment. Representative Mike McLean.
Yes. Yes. I mean.
Senate Bill 27B, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 28, relating to Oregon Health Authority fee amounts and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 28A. Representative Salinas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. SB 28 increases the statutory fees related to the licensing and inspection of tourist facilities, public spas and pools, bed and breakfasts, restaurants and vending machines, and for restaurant plan reviews. These fees were last revised in 2003 and support the corresponding regulatory work required of the Oregon Health Authority. Because OHA delegates most of this work to local public health authorities, the anticipated fiscal impact on the OHA budget is expected to be minimal. In 2019-21, OHA expects the fee increases to generate approximately $64,000 in additional revenue to support the agency's costs. The amendment includes an emergency clause and establishes operative dates of July 1st, 2019 for the fee changes. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of SB 28A as amended.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Finley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Madam Speaker, in a prior life, I was a city manager. And in that city manager's role, I was responsible for the municipal water system. Every time OHA would call or come by to visit, I would receive an invoice in the mail. $2,000 to drive by your storage tank, $1,000 to check your pump stations, to drive by it. I find that very insulting that they would be so predatory on cities that they are in charge to assist. So that's why the revenue impact statement is low, because they're billing the heck out of the cities that they're dealing with, cities that have a hard time funding all of these things, municipal water systems in cities that are struggling to get by. They're raising the rates for their utility rates, so they can pay the large fees for OHA to come by. So while I think they're a great organization, I think their funding scheme is out of balance, and I'm a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Salinas, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion that the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Helt votes no. Senate Bill 28A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 163, relating to the ABLE program and prescribing an effective date.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 163. Representative Marsh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, Senate Bill 163 relates to the Achieving a Better Life Experience program, also known as the ABLE program. The measure would permit the Oregon 529 Savings Board within the state treasury to collect application, account, or administrative fees to defray the costs of the Achieving a Better Life Experience program. The measure has indeterminate fiscal impact and no revenue impact. The measure is effective on the 91st day after adjournment. Your Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion. Representative Wallen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question, not necessarily to the carrier, but to somebody who can answer it, but we'll try with the carrier. From whom will these...
question of the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
I will.
She will try. Let's go. Right. Let's go.
I am wondering from whom these fees are going to be collected.
Madam Speaker, the fees are actually already being collected by rule, and this would give the department statutory authority to collect those fees. They are collected from families, individuals who establish the ABLE accounts, and the fees simply go to the overhead of administering the accounts.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Further discussion. Representative Hayden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
To the bill.
To the bill.
To the bill.
I stand to strongly support the ABLE accounts that we set up in Oregon. I was one of the chief sponsors of that bill when we first brought that to Oregon to help those with disabilities to have more ability to save their money. We set aside some funds to make that a possibility, but I don't believe that we should go so far to take all of these administrative fees. I do think that there is benefit for these individuals. I think those benefits also offset some of our costs within the government, the state government, and I think we shouldn't be putting barriers in application fees to these folks. We're spending money to reach out to them, to get them to apply, to get them to join. We've had over 1,000 members take advantage of this. To become part of this organization, to set aside some money for their children, themselves, and others. A very, very important legislation. I just disagree with this aspect of application fees, and for that, I will vote no on this.
Thank you, Representative. For the discussion, Representative Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, I would encourage a yes vote on Senate Bill 163. Your subcommittee on general government took a hard look at this piece of legislation and realized there is a reality that programs cost money to implement. And so we asked ourselves, what are those best ways to fund this important project? We did this in consultation with the state treasurer. Multiple conversations were had, and in the end, we felt this was the best way to proceed forward. Colleagues, Senate Bill 163, in a bipartisan manner, made sense to those of us on the Budget Committee, and I'd encourage an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. For the discussion? Seeing none, Representative Marsh, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a word. I just want to emphasize that these fees are already being collected. We contract with a third-party administrator to actually run the program, so there are some costs involved. This simply gives the statutory authority in place of the rulemaking that's currently governing the fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Barker, how do you vote? Barker votes aye. Representative Wilson, how do you vote? Wilson votes aye. Senate Bill 163, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 166, relating to retirement savings plans and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 166. Representative Marsh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, Senate Bill 166 would permit the Oregon Retirement Savings Board, also known as Oregon Saves, within the state treasury to enter into agreements with other states to provide services related to retirement savings plans. These services could include investment management, account management, record keeping, custody, website and materials development, and reporting. In the past several years, Oregon Saves has accumulated wisdom and experience that could be of use to other states. Senate Bill 166 allows the program to share that experience in the hope of identifying efficiencies or assisting other programs. The measure has an indeterminate fiscal impact and no revenue impact and would take effect upon passage. Your Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Marsh, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion that the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Bowles, how do you vote? Bowles votes aye. Representative Sanchez, how do you vote? Sanchez votes aye. Senate Bill 166, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 181, relating to child caring agencies that are county programs and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 181A. Representative Skelton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, SB 181 adds county programs providing services to children in the custody of Department of Human Services or the Oregon Youth Authority to the definition of child caring agencies that are licensed by DHS. The bill also includes language around county juvenile department reports that relate to participation in federal foster care programs. The bill has a minimal fiscal impact, and the Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of SB 181 as amended.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion that the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk will open the voting system. Representative Springer, how do you vote? Springer votes aye. Representative Bossart Davis votes aye. Representative Drazen votes aye. Senate Bill 181A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 488, relating to immunization against influenza for incarcerated persons and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 488B. Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, on January 15, 2018, Tina Ferry died of the flu. According to Willamette Week, she spent her final hours in a hospital bed in Tualatin, shackled, surrounded by her family as a prison guard slept nearby. What the tragic story of Tina Ferry, who was a person in custody at Coffee Creek, demonstrated was that some adults in custody in Oregon lack access to basic health care. In this case, it was a flu shot. Statistics from the time show that approximately 300 of the 1,645 inmates at Coffee Creek were immunized against the flu. That's just 18% of the population. So when the flu popped up, it's not surprising that it rapidly spread, ultimately leading to tragic consequences. Oregon law is silent on the provision of influenza vaccinations for adults in custody at the Department of Corrections and local correctional facilities. Currently, Oregon administrative rule states only that immunizations and preventative treatment shall be made available to inmates in DOC custody as medically indicated. In 2018, approximately 4,550 vaccines had been administered across the DOC facilities, which has a total population of 14,550 persons in custody. This bill comes to you after receiving unanimous support from the Senate. This legislation requires the Department of Correction to offer each individual in their physical custody an immunization against the influenza virus, and for each individual who does not opt out to schedule an appointment for the administration of that immunization. Colleagues, preventative measures like flu shots can save money and, more importantly, save lives. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative, for the discussion. Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Senate Bill 488B, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 492, relating to support provided to parents with disabilities and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 492. Representative Peluso.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 492 relates to how parents with disabilities are treated under our laws governing the termination of parental rights. It clarifies that child and family reunification services will be provided in such a way that parents and guardians with disabilities receive services and opportunities equal to those provided to those without disabilities. In 2018, this body passed Senate Bill 1526, which stated that courts may not terminate parental rights on the basis of the parent's disability alone. Instead, they must analyze whether the parent's conduct is such that it renders them incapable of providing proper care. Senate Bill 492 is a continuation of that principle, recognizing that people with disabilities can be capable and loving parents and deserve the same types of support as those without disabilities. This bill has a minimal fiscal impact. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of Senate Bill 492.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close?
I do not.
She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Wallen, how do you vote? Wallen votes aye. Senate Bill 492, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Colleagues, before we break for lunch, we're going to do two more bills, Senate Bill 558 and Senate Bill 643. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 558, relating to highway speeds.
Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 558A. Representative McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 558 comes to you from your Joint Committee on Transportation. It's a close mirror to House Bill 2682, which passed in 2017 and gave the City of Portland the ability to establish speed limits that are 5 miles per hour below those set by the state on neighborhood streets. In April, the City of Portland completed the shifting of all its residential streets from 25 miles per hour to 20 miles per hour. Portland reports that speed reduction on these residential streets has improved safety and livability. Senate Bill 558 allows the rest of the cities in Oregon to lower their residential speeds if they so choose. The bill does three things. It specifies that the designated speed must be 5 miles per hour lower than the statutory speed. It requires that the highway must be in a residential district, and specifically may not be an arterial. And it requires the city to provide appropriate signage of the designated speed. Colleagues, this was a collaborative effort over a long period of time. A diverse transportation stakeholder group came together, including the League of Oregon Cities, the Association of Oregon Counties, AAA, and the Oregon Trucking Association. They are all supportive of Senate Bill 558. The bill passed out of committee with 1 no vote and passed the Senate with a 25-3 vote, and I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Senate Bill 558A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 643, relating to fuel storage facility compatibility grant program and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 643A. Representative Leaf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I bring you Senate Bill 643, relating to fuel storage facility compatibility grant program. SB 643 removes the statutory cap on the total amount of money that can be dispersed through fuel storage facility compatibility grant program administered by the Offices of Emergency Management. It also increases the size of grants that may be awarded through the program, which provides grants to card-like facilities to install generator connectors to their fuel storage tanks to provide access to fuel in emergencies. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of SB 643 as amended.
Thank you, Representative. For the discussion, Representative Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want
to the bill.
This bill is a continued effort to try and make sure our state is a little more resilient, to explain how this matters in terms of emergency preparedness. After the catastrophic event occurs, we have fuel in places that we can't get it out of, and that's what the generator program is to do, to make sure that the folks that have card lock mechanisms already for accountability have the generator necessary to be able to pump the fuel into emergency vehicles to be able to respond during that time. So it's actually a public-private partnership. Really simple bill that does a whole lot of good. So encouraging I vote on this.
Thank you, Representative. For the discussion. Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Wilson, how do you vote? Wilson votes aye. Senate Bill 643A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Before we entertain a recess motion to 2 p.m., if there are any announcements, I will have just one. Today is the Senate President's birthday. If you have bills over the Senate, you might want to wish him a happy birthday. For other announcements, caucus leaders, I don't know if you have announcements. Representative Kenny Geyer, do you have an announcement?
Yeah, quick announcement. Number one, my committee, please meet right outside, Human Services and Housing Committee, right after this, just for a quick picture. Number two, there's a COFA rally right now. I realize that we have caucuses and things like that, but if you can get there at any time before 1 o'clock, there is a rally outside. COFA is the Compact of Free Association governing a relationship between the United States and 3 Pacific Island nations, federal states of Micronesia, Marshall Marshall Islands, and Palau, where Jason is from. And they are very engaged. We have one of the largest COFA populations in Oregon. Many of you have been involved in legislation to help them. They're very engaged civically, contribute to our local, state, and federal government. Please join them on the steps to help raise awareness about this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And committee photo in the main lobby. Further announcements, Representative Williamson.
Just a reminder, Democrats, we are caucusing at noon, so grab your lunch and come on up.
Thank you, Representative. Other announcements. Representative Greg Smith, 2 p.m. today, June 18th.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I move we recess until 2 p.m. today.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Greg Smith moves the House stand in recess until 2 p.m. today, June 18th, 2019. Without objection, the House will stand in recess. Good afternoon. The House will come to order. The clerk will open the voting system to determine the presence of a quorum. Quorum is present. Messages from the Senate.
Madam Speaker, I am directed by the President to inform you the Senate has passed Senate Bills 224, 451, 998, and adopted SCR 37. Madam Speaker, I am directed by the President to inform you the Senate has passed House Bills 2266, 2402, 2460, 2787, 2847, 3324, and passed the following House Bills as amended by the Senate. House Bills 2867, 2949, 2185, and House Bill 2841. Conference Committee appointed Senators Dembro, Bentz, Roblin.
Committee reports. Committee report file 214 has been distributed. And having recessed under the order of business of third reading of Senate bills, the House will continue under that order of business. Third reading of Senate bills. Clerk will read the next Senate bill.
Senate Bill 815 relating to information that must be provided by residential care facilities and prescribing an effective date.
Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 815B. Representative Knauss.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 815 is a policy bill that comes from Ways and Means. It requires residential care facilities to provide specified information to individuals at the time the individual applies for admission to the facility. This information is to include a summary explanation of the services provided, a summary explanation of the types of care that is not provided, a statement that if the facility is not capable of meeting the resident's needs, it may require the resident to pursue other options, including moving to or going to another care setting, a statement that if a resident leaves to receive acute medical, psychiatric, nursing facility, or other care before the resident may return, the facility must first evaluate whether they are capable of meeting the resident's care needs, and if not, the resident will not be permitted to return. A statement of a resident's right to appeal if the facility requires the resident to leave or does not permit the resident to return. A statement of whether the facility will arrange for or otherwise coordinate hospice. This information must be in writing, be written in plain language, be explained to the individual or the person acting on behalf of the individual in a manner that they understand, be provided separately from all other disclosure and residential agreement documents, and require the signature of the individual or the person acting on behalf of the individual. The bill also delays the publication of the first quality metrics report required under ORS 443.4461 from July 2020 to July 2021. The bill has no fiscal impact. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of Senate Bill 815 as amended, and so do I.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, would you like to close? He does not. Colleagues, we're going to stand at ease a moment because I think there are some folks running late from a bill signing. Do we know where they are? Or who they are? House will come to order. We were just double checking on some colleagues. They are still on a committee, but we will mark them as excused for business of the House and move on. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Peluso, how do you vote? Peluso votes aye. Representative Bottom is an aye. Representative Springer, how do you vote? Springer votes aye. Senate Bill 815B, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 883, relating to animal rescue entities.
Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 883A. Representative Neron.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senate Bill 883 transfers responsibilities for oversight and regulation of animal rescue facilities within the state from city and county animal control and licensing agencies to the state veterinarian within the Department of Agriculture. Centralizing oversight at the state level will help to ensure that our animal welfare laws are being properly and consistently enforced and that rescue facilities meet adequate licensing and accountability standards. It removes the potential conflict of interest for many local enforcement agencies that own or contract shelters, and it saves cities and counties money. Additionally, central oversight will give us better data about the health, sources, and disposition of animals at rescue facilities throughout the state. The bill is supported by the Oregon Humane Society and other animal welfare organizations. ODA is permitted to charge a fee and issue animal licenses to support the agency's cost to inspect and enforce the rescue facilities. The bill funds 2 positions, 1.5 FTE, and has an anticipated one-time expenditure of $316,133 general fund and $114,168 other funds in the 2019-2021 biennium. Additional revenue generated from licensing fees is estimated at $131,400 other funds in the 2019-2021 biennium. The program will be self-sustaining in future biennia. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of SB 883 as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Wallen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
I know the impulse is anytime there's animals involved, we should just all vote yes. But this bill takes local control away and centralizes it, and for that reason, I'm going to be a no, and I urge others to do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Neron, would you like to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Smith Warner, how do you vote? Smith Warner votes aye. Senate Bill 883A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1044 relating to transportation electrification.
Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 1044A. Representative Reardon.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. This afternoon, I'd like to tell you about Senate Bill 1044 and how it will help Oregon transition to vehicles that have zero emissions. Right now, not enough people know about electric vehicles, there's not enough infrastructure to support them, and there is an upfront price premium to pay, one that is recouped over the life of owning the vehicle, but one that serves as a barrier to purchase regardless. So this year, we have an opportunity to help the state understand these barriers better and to analyze whether, connected with the carbon dioxide emissions goals that the state has, we are on a path to making changes we need to the transportation sector to get the sector on a path to meeting its share of the reduction goal. Senate Bill 1044 comes to you with a vote of 22-5 on the Senate floor. It establishes a framework for helping the transportation sector evolve into a clean energy future. Let me tell you a little bit about it. The bill does the following. It connects the greenhouse gas reduction goals and the transportation sector. 2, it allows the Department of Energy to provide much needed data around transportation and electrification as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector. In an iterative requirement, it mandates that the department suggest additional supports until the point where the state is on the right track. And 3, it helps schools electrify their buses by allowing those schools that have already made energy efficiency improvements to spend the public purpose charge dollars they receive on zero emission vehicles, including electric buses. And finally, it codifies the governor's 2017 executive order and DAS policies around moving toward an electrified fleet. These policies have the state lead by example with a 25% purchase requirement for zero emission vehicles. The bill was crafted with the understanding that adopting electric and other zero-emission vehicle policies, as we have over the last few legislative sessions, without an understanding of how the marketplace is responding, would potentially result in the adoption of policies for EV support that miss the mark. And I want to point out just briefly that I talk a lot about EVs because that's kind of where we are with the technology right now, but we're not limited to, so when I say zero emission vehicles, that could include hydrogen powered ones and other technologies as well. So I just want to make that clear. And this bill would put the Oregon Department of Energy in charge of assessment and reporting back to this body regarding whether additional policy supports were necessary to promote the zero emission vehicle market. And it's a good bill, it should pass, and I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Bowles.
Question to the carrier.
Question to the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
Absolutely.
He does.
And I apologize. I think this is a softball question. I'm just really curious. It says the fiscal impact of this is indeterminate, and it also has a fiscal impact of this bill that would start in 2025, 2027 biennium. And I think you touched on this in your introduction, but I'm trying to figure out why we're passing a bill in 2019 that we're going to do the fiscal in 2025.
Well, that's a great question, and I'm really glad you brought that up. So all we're trying to do is really monitor the market over time and really keep track of what's going on in that market, because right now the goal is 50,000 vehicles. We're up to around 22,000. So we need to watch that over time, and that's where we're asking for regular reports back over a longer period of time to keep track of it. And, as a driver of an electric BMW, I'm sure you would appreciate those reports.
Follow-up question?
Follow-up. Does the carrier yield?
Absolutely, sure.
He does.
Okay. In Section 7, there's a public purpose charge. But it doesn't say what that charge is.
Public purpose, Madam Speaker, the public purpose charge is comes from funding through, if I can remember all of this, through the electric utility companies that provide money for programs such as this to improve our use and efficiency of our electric infrastructure.
Thank you. To the bill?
To the bill.
I know I stood up here and talked about my electric car before, which I do enjoy. I have some concerns about this. With the 2020, we had a goal of 50,000 zero-emission vehicles, which I think we're not even at 15,000 yet. Now we're going to go by 2025 to 250,000, and then we have this delayed. It just doesn't feel quite right. I think that we're making goals and aspirations that we don't either know have the resources or the plan to actually attain. But I appreciate the concept, and I do support the idea of expanding our infrastructure. I'm hoping that this gets us there, but I'm not convinced. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Hovey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill. Representative Reardon, you might want to sit down just a second. Thank you. Sorry. To the bill.
Madam Speaker and colleagues, I fully support this bill, though I want to join my colleague from Salem, Almsville, and Turner, express some concern about the fiscal on this. Mostly that is directing the Department of Energy to take on some tasks and some reports, and we just, in the Ways and Means process, reduced their budget and cut their FTE from 6 to 8 positions. And so I am concerned about this agency having the resources to do everything we're asking them to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I still urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Wallen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question to the carrier, if he will yield.
Question of the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
Yes.
He does.
Thank you. It appears that this bill establishes goals and directs the department to submit reports, but nothing else. Is that accurate? Is it just a goal setting and reporting function, or is there some teeth to it? Is there anything that the population of Oregon is going to be required to do to comply with it?
The bill does require reporting. That's the primary goal. There's also, as I mentioned, leading by example. So the Department of Administrative Services will be required to make purchase of some zero-emission vehicles. I have 25%.
Additional question?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Bossard-Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would, to the bill?
To the bill.
I would also like to also say that I'm concerned that there isn't a fiscal until the 2025-27 biennium, yet we're talking about goals that we need to be doing. I also want to read from the fiscal impact. The bill directs executive branch agencies to purchase zero-emission vehicles when feasible to total 25% of the agency's fleet. I'm glad that in there it does say when feasible. I also would like to state on the record that I hope that also means economically viable and economically responsible. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was a no in committee on this bill, and I'll be a no on the floor. I think it's, at this point in time, it's too early for the state to mandate goals for trucks, even medium-sized trucks. We're not ready for that. The bill sets a target that we know we can't meet. The bill sets a 90% conversion by 2035, and California has a 30 or 33% conversion by 2050. It's overly aggressive. Currently, we're selling, according to testimony, about 6,000 EVs a year out of 185,000 vehicles. And also, we don't have the infrastructure in place to support that aggressive of a goal. So I think we need more realistic goals on this. I'll be a no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Drazen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
So I feel like after taking a little peek at this, that this is quite possibly one of the most unnecessary bills we'll see cross this floor, considering yesterday we just passed cap and trade. So cap and trade said by 2050 we're going to meet these emission standards, and the transportation sector was what, 75% of that? That's what is contributing to greenhouse gases. And so to meet those goals, some of this stuff is going to happen. By 2035, this says that they are hoping that 90% of the new motor vehicles sold annually will be zero emissions vehicles. That's a full 15 years before the cap and trade deadline of 2050. We're tracking stuff that is going to happen through the markets as prices increase and as all these caps go into place. We have goals set forth here that are, to me, entirely redundant given what we just passed across this floor for cap and trade. I think this is really, really unnecessary. And maybe it was necessary when we had only an executive order in place and we only had the governor's sort of philosophical view of this. But now that we're moving legislation through this process, I really think that this is a bureaucracy that isn't needed, and this is information that is going to be self-evident through a lot of other sources. So I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion. Representative Zika.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question of the carrier.
Question of the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
Yes.
He does.
I apologize for not getting this question ahead of time, but reviewing this bill, I wanted to just make sure. Were there any discussions about for electronic vehicles, the mining of lithium or the recycling or disposal of the batteries?
Madam Speaker, I was not in attendance at all of the hearings, and I do not have an answer to that. Perhaps somebody from the committee could bail me up. I just have a new source of information. No.
Thank you, Representative. For follow-up, Representative?
To the bill.
To the bill.
Madam Speaker, I have serious concerns when it comes to this type of language in a bill to have these lofty goals of electronic vehicles when we've all heard the stories of lithium mining and how some of it is unethical, and there's a high pollution that goes into refining it and transporting it over here from overseas, and then also the disposal of the batteries. There's a lot of sections in our state that actually do not have battery recycling stations. So that said, also with the goals for that many electronic vehicles, I don't know that our electric grid could withstand that kind of I think we need to have some upgrades on that too. So with a further investigation on that, I will be a no.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion. Seeing none, Representative Reardon, would you like to close?
Just briefly, Madam Speaker, I think actually some of the comments that I've heard did a great job of reinforcing the need for this bill. And there was concern about not having enough sales. And if you look at the bill, I know some of you are less enthusiastic about yesterday's afternoon's bill than others, but the opportunity that we have is one of the biggest opportunities is to reduce greenhouse gases through the transportation sector. And a way to get there is through zero emission vehicles. Right now that's electric. Down the road it could be hydrogen, it could be some other technology. But the fact that we're not on track to meet those goals right now is the point of this whole bill, which is we need that market data. We need to be able to have that. How are we doing on the purchase? What are some of the issues? And because I just think down the road we're going to be asked at some point to invest or to set policies, and we need to know what's happening, and that's why we're asking for the reports back. We also know that over time, these electric vehicles pay for themselves and reduce operating cost. I've been driving an electric vehicle. I'm on my third one right now. I take great joy in driving right past my fuel station. It's a much happier experience than when I drive my F-150 by that service station. So, but over time, there is a larger upfront cost for an electric vehicle. That's one of the challenges in the marketplace right now. But how do we help overcome some of those challenges? So we need that market data. We need As far as the battery life, I'm not up to date on the current mining practices for lithium and other things. What I do know is that these batteries, once they're used in a car, maybe which is a very demanding application, that you can actually repurpose those. And so perhaps they could be that backup battery that you have around your house. So this is developing technology. Another reason why we need this reports back on what's happening so we can respond appropriately and in a timely manner. So I think it's prudent. It's what I would do if I were running a marketing or a manufacturing organization. I would want that marketing information so that I can have the right products and services. It's no different here. So I think anybody would agree, and I hope your button pushing indicates that you do agree that 1044 is a solid bill and gives your support.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion that the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Doherty, how do you vote? Doherty votes aye. Senate Bill 1044A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 123, relating to unlawful employment practices.
Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 123B. Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I bring you Senate Bill 123, which came out of the Senate unanimously. In 2017, the Equal Pay Act expanded existing equal pay laws based on sex to make it an unlawful employment practice to discriminate between employees or applicants in the payment of compensation based on race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, marital status, veteran status, disability, or age. The Act prohibited an employer or prospective employer from using salary history to screen applicants or to determine compensation, or from acquiring the salary history of an applicant or employee from a current or former employer unless the applicant chose to disclose the salary history when negotiating compensation. As the legislation went to rulemaking and it was clear that some technical fixes needed to be made and the intent of the legislation needed to be clarified, Senate Bill 123B prohibits employment agencies from using or acquiring salary history in the same manner as employers and prospective employers. It adds provisions for modified or light-duty assignments to not violate the equal pay law, provides additional guidance for implementation of pay equity, outlines the practices for civil action over equal pay, and makes allowances for collective bargaining agreements. Colleagues, I urge and I vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion. Representative Bossart-Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill?
To the bill.
Thank you. As a job creator, I was fully aware of the pay equity bill in 2017, and along with small businesses around the state and this building, turns out, we all scrambled to figure out how to implement this bill. But today, I do appreciate the fixes, and today I stand in support of Senate Bill 123. One of the important things that the original bill did was allow employers to be proactive and provide an enforcement mechanism that doesn't force employers into court, but gives them an opportunity to address pay inequities within their own workforces. Senate Bill 123 is another example of labor and business coming together. I appreciate the work that's been done on this bill and leadership in the Senate and House for their work on needed technical fixes to make this law workable. I think that's most accurately highlighted in the joint letter on OLS from Senator Taylor and Senator Knopp, the chair and vice chair of the Senate Workforce Committee. As I think we all know, if employers identify a pay inequity, the equal pay law really only provides one way to comply, increasing pay, as lowering wages is expressly prohibited. If a pay discrepancy exists, increasing pay across the board can be incredibly expensive for public and private employers, particularly small businesses, as they seek to come into compliance with this new law. We saw that here in the State House with the governor's request for $10 million to address pay inequities within the executive branch. Given employers' desire to do the right thing and address pay inequities while operating within the confines of their budget, I understand that nothing in Senate Bill 123 changes employers' ability to freeze or red circle or red line, as it's called, to comply with Oregon's equal pay law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Williamson, you wish to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Bonham votes aye. Representative McEwen votes aye. Representative Neerman votes aye. Representative Reschke votes aye. Representative Greg Smith votes aye. Representative Springer votes aye. Senate Bill 123B, having received the constitutional... I'm sorry, did I miss Representative Doherty? Representative Doherty votes aye. I apologize for overlooking you. Senate Bill 123B, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. The clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 361, relating to the prudent investor rule.
The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 361A. Representative Smith Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, Senate Bill 361 comes to you from your House Rules Committee at the request of the Oregon State Bar. The purpose of Senate Bill 361 is to make sure that when an individual creates a trust, whether for their family, a charity, or for another purpose, that the assets of the trust are managed in the way that the person wanted them to be managed. When an individual sets up a trust, they do so because they want their money managed and distributed in a certain way when they're gone and unable to do it themselves. A trust document is the set of rules that guides this process and instructs a trustee on how to manage the trust assets. A trustee is also responsible to the beneficiaries of the trust to make sure that the money is managed responsibly. Usually, this means managing money for maximum return. However, the trustee is also responsible for managing the trust in the way that the trustor laid out in the trust document. Sometimes there can be a conflict if a trustor creates a trust with the intention that money to be managed, with the intention that money be managed with particular values in mind, rather than just the maximization of returns. This can put trustees in a difficult position because beneficiaries may second guess the decisions a trustee made, and they may not share the values of the person who created the trust. Under current law, these conflicts can result in litigation when a beneficiary does not want a trust managed in the way that a trustee believes the trust document requires. Senate Bill 361 addresses these concerns by clarifying that the terms of a trust may vary the default rules about how a trustee should manage trust assets. If an individual wants to create a trust that restricts or focuses how money can be invested, Senate Bill 361 ensures they have that ability. The bill also clarifies that a trustee may consider, quote, the intent, desire, and personal values, end quote, including environmental, social, and governance factors of both the person who created the trust and the beneficiaries to the extent that it's known. This bill does not require persons creating a trust to abide by any new rules or restrict their decisions in any way, and it does not permit trustees to insert their own personal beliefs or values into how they manage someone else's trust. All of these changes are intended to put the power to decide how a trust is managed back into the hands of the person who originally created it, letting them decide how they want their money spent after they are gone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Representative Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question of the carrier?
Question of the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
With trepidation.
With trepidation.
That's fine. And I'm sorry I didn't get this to you earlier. I think this is a fair question, and you probably know the answer to it, so it's not a gotcha thing or anything. Is under current trust law, is a person able to create a trust that's dedicated to sustainable or socially responsible investment strategies?
Mr. Speaker, current law is silent.
Representative?
So can I follow?
A follow-up?
Yes.
So I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. So if, I'm going to assume that this.
Excuse me, Representative Dearman, if I could have you address the podium. Thank you very much.
If current law is silent, does that mean that does mean that you can do that then?
Mr. Speaker, yes, it does mean that, and it also means that that is where the conflict comes in that we're trying to resolve in this bill, that inherent conflict that of maximizing return. It's the conflict between those that this is trying to establish some groundwork on.
Representative Dearman?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that'll be all.
All right, thank you very much. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Smith Warner, do you wish to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Excuse me, aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Alonzo Leon votes aye. Representative Drazen votes aye. Representative Helt votes aye. Representative Springer votes no. Speaker Kotek is excused. Senate Bill 361A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. And the clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 455, relating to higher education contracting.
Thank you. The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 455A. Representative Holvey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. Senate Bill 455A. This measure requires institutions of higher education, including the Oregon Health Science University, public universities, and community colleges to award contracts for improvements to real property with a cost in excess of $8 million that are paid with proceeds of state bonds to contractors that are training agents as defined in ORS 660.010. Contractors and any subcontractors are also required to recruit and retain women and minorities to perform work under qualified contracts. Subcontractors awarded contracts of at least $200,000 must also be training agents and establish and execute plans for outreach and retention of women and minorities, unless these requirements would cause unreasonable expense or delays or limit the bidder pool to less than 3. Institutions of higher education are required to report the amount of the work performed by apprentices, women, and minorities under qualified contracts to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means by February 1st each year. Requirements apply to contracts advertised or solicited by Portland State University, the University of Oregon, Oregon State University, and Oregon Health Science University on or after January 1st, 2020. Institutes of higher education and community colleges not listed previously apply to contracts advertised or otherwise solicited on or after January 1st, 2021. This is a good bill for expanding the workforce in the construction industry. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Representative Solman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, I rise before you today in support of Senate Bill 455A and to highlight the need to continue to develop our state's workforce from cradle to career. The need is real. We miss the linkage to career many times. This bill addresses that. We need to protect our vital infrastructure jobs that are seeing our workforce age, and to protect those jobs by creating more opportunities for young people seeking employment. The average age of construction workers has been steadily rising over the last few decades, and today, in 2019, it currently is 42.6 years of age. As these workers continue to age in these labor-intense jobs, it is important to train the next generation of workers who build our infrastructure and keep our economy strong. Our youth need opportunities that a student can take to find their career. Apprenticeship opportunities are a key part of the education process and can provide lucrative jobs to students to find their passion in those areas. Students like my son Matthew, who chose the trade apprenticeship route, and as a mom, I have always told my boys, you gotta like what you swing your legs out of bed for in the morning. And I thank my local Hillsborough Chamber of Commerce School to Career program for helping Matthew find that path. For my youngest kiddo, he's 22, he has found that passion working in the elements and outdoors, working high above the ground, sometimes swinging tree limb from tree limb, and working with his hands and trimming the trees above our power lines to keep the power running strong in our homes. This job keeps him very busy. He is currently in his second year of his two-year apprenticeship program with IBEW Local 125 and will soon hold the title of line clearance tree trimmer. And he will climb that salary ladder. Yes, he makes a very good living for a 22-year-old, and he appreciates the support of fellow seasoned workers by utilizing their experience to better his skills. Yes, he attended a trade school and has no school debt. More importantly, he loves what he swings his legs out of bed for in the morning. There are waiting lists of young men and women who want to join apprenticeship programs. They are ready to work. This bill will allow greater opportunity for those who want to seek a contractor or construction-related pathway to have access to that pathway by increasing the opportunity for them to work. We need to invest in our young workforce and train them up for our future. It helps us all. This is a step in the right direction, and I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, today I'm pleased to stand up to support Senate Bill 455A. But I want to remind everyone there are those who rightfully would suggest or infer that Senate Bill 455A takes a step beyond what has been agreed upon in previous sessions. And I wasn't part of those conversations, and I don't know. But I would hope that labor and those folks who collaborate with labor could come together and create a synergy to where both mutually benefit. Colleagues, today on Senate Bill 455A, I'll be voting yes for a very simple reason. I genuinely believe that if we're going to provide opportunities either through incentive or through contracts for entities to do work with the state of Oregon or on state of Oregon projects, then perhaps they need to step up and provide training opportunities for those who may benefit. And so I believe Senate Bill 455A is a bill that brings synergy together, and I hope you'll vote yes with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Wallen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
It's going to break my heart to vote no on this bill, because I couldn't agree more that we need more people in the trades. I fully support apprenticeship programs. I wish we could double and triple the size of them right now. But with how we have been underfunding our universities in the last decade, and to the point that tuition hikes are big in the news, they certainly are in my district. And I certainly know how they've doubled and tripled since my oldest went to school. putting this burden on just the colleges and universities to hire people in just this narrow band, and merely doing the paperwork on ensuring that you've got 15% of the work being done by apprentices is a huge burden on the project. It adds costs to the project to universities and colleges that are already underfunded, and universities and colleges that are in districts that are far, far away from the population centers, where there simply aren't the bodies to fulfill the requirements of this. I really, really want to support apprenticeship programs, and especially in the trade. I want to support the trades. I want to support our young people going into those jobs that are very real and that do give them a reason to swing their legs out of bed in the morning. That is near and dear to my heart. But this bill isn't the way to get there, and I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Holvey, you wish to close?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a clarification, the 15% requirement mentioned by the representative from Medford, that piece came out of the bill, so the 15% requirement is not in it. And there's a little more flexibility for the universities if they're, as I read, that if they can't, if there's unreasonable expense or delay, or there's a limited bidder pool, they're not subject to this requirement. I think that it's always a chicken and egg thing. We desperately need workers in this industry as well as others, but especially in this industry, as the age of the construction workers is getting older and older. And it's a great opportunity, and with some of the other work that's being done around apprenticeship and trying to expand state-approved apprenticeship programs around the state, there is actually a pathway for rural areas that don't have access to those types of training agents, for those contractors in those areas to become training agents and start hiring local people to become apprentices and start developing this workforce around the state. I think it's a great bill. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Findley. Is excused. Representative Helt. Helt votes aye. Representative McLean. Votes aye. Representative Sanchez. Votes aye. Senate Bill 455A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. The clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 579, relating to death with dignity.
The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 579. Representative Greenlick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 579 represents a very modest change in the death with dignity program. A person is eligible to request the services of the program when they have less than 6 months to live. In the current program, you can ask for a fatal prescription orally, and then you need to wait 15 days before you can get access to the drug. You wait 15 days, and then you make another oral request. At 13 days, you make a written request, and at the end of that 15-day period, you can get access to the drug. However, This bill allows, if you have less than 15 days to live, it doesn't make sense to have to wait 15 days in order to have access to the program. So if you have less than 15 days to live, the requirement that you wait 15 days from the oral request to the written request to getting the prescription is waived. That's all it does. It certainly makes sense if you have less than 15 days to live, not to have to wait 15 days to have your wishes granted at that point. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would recommend a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Representative Post.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Human process is the idea of thinking things through. How many of us have made last-minute decisions on a speech, perhaps, that we were going to give right here on the House floor? And how many times have we perhaps made a last-minute revision before delivering that speech? We as humans function as processors. We need time to process our decisions every day. Why do we have stays of execution? Because of the process, the human process. Why do we carefully make such decisions? Because of process. We don't always process well. I can attest to that. So I ask, what's 48 hours in the entire lifetime of a person? 48 hours. What's 48 hours to perhaps prevent potential shame, guilt, and remorse for a family? SB 579 creates a dangerous loophole in Oregon's physician-assisted suicide law. It removes the 48-hour waiting period to prevent abuse and ensure that every decision about dying has been thoroughly vetted and processed. Our Creator knew that death was such a huge part of life that He gave us assurance that there is a time for it and it shouldn't be hastily taken away. King Solomon wrote, "There's an appointed time for everything. There's a time for every event under heaven, a time to give birth and a time to die." His dad, King David, wrote, "Your eyes have seen me, unformed substance. And in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them." So I bring you back to the process. I have personally been at the side of people who have made that process choice. I've been with people who were smiling at the end and those who weren't smiling at the end. But we don't always have the ability to make such an incredibly important decision on the fly. And that's why, as processors and as human beings with all of our flaws, I really think we need to leave well enough alone and leave this law where it is now. And I urge you to join me in voting no on Senate Bill 579. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 579 makes it easier for bad actors to continue to harm the elderly, which is already a significant problem in Oregon. In 2016 alone, there were almost 4,000 reported victims of elder abuse. In 2018, Karen Bolt was sentenced to prison for the attempted murder of 2 elderly people within her care. In 2016, Harvey Hansen died by an overdose of narcotics and tranquilizers administered to him by Avamere Rivermark of Eugene staff. In 2005, 2 Oregon nurses assisted Wendy Melcher with her wish for assisted suicide and did so without a physician's permission. The nurses were never prosecuted. Rather than helping prevent elder abuse, Senate Bill 579 will make it worse. Senate Bill 579 removes safeguards promoted by supporters of assisted suicide. When Measure 16 passed 25 years ago, the 15-day waiting period and the 48-hour waiting period stood as an integral component of the law. The waiting periods, voters were told, would prevent coercion and ensure that a person makes an independent decision. Removing these waiting periods will facilitate on-demand, same-day assisted suicide and will not prevent patients from coercion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Representative Bowles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, I imagine over the past several months, we've gotten to learn a lot about each other. And I shared different portions of my family and my history. I rise today in opposition to this bill. It's probably not a surprise. I've had the privilege in my life to walk along people who are facing death. And I am concerned about removing the safeguards to the vulnerable in a time when they're especially vulnerable. And I think about my grandmother, who, if you would have known her, was a force of nature, was one of the strongest survivors I have ever known. And the last months before she passed away, when we would go, she was easily intimidated by her doctor, by those around her. I was her advocate. I made sure they talked to her. I made sure that she understood what was happening, and I walked her through those last days of her life. It was an honor and a privilege, and something that I remember with a grateful heart. I also have a brother who has disabilities, and I am his advocate. And so I look at these bills very seriously because these are the people in my community, and I also watched a lot of people not have a Denise Bowles in their life. And those are the ones that I'm worried about here. And so I would ask that you would consider opposing this bill, because it simply allows the protections that the very serious step of assisted suicide should have. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Wilde.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of Senate Bill 579.
Be Representative to the bill.
To the bill. Thank you. I rise today in support of Senate Bill 579. As a health lawyer and administrator, and as someone who's helped a family member grapple with her end-of-life choices, I believe that death with dignity is less about dying and more about having control over your life. As people move toward the great mystery of what comes after death, some have an understandable desire to avoid living with intolerable pain in their remaining days on earth. When we drafted the Death with Dignity statute, we built in waiting periods to make sure that people did not make this choice without due deliberation. As our experience of the program grew, we began to see the downside of this restriction. We excluded people who were in their final days and suffering from excruciating pain. Mr. Speaker, I cannot imagine what it would be like to be in that situation, and I have no idea what I would decide. However, I know that I would not want it to. However, I do know that I would want it to be my choice. As a legislator, it is not my job to make this decision for anybody else. This bill ensures that the only person to evaluate the quality of a person's final days is the only one qualified to make that decision, the person herself. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Prusak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
So I didn't expect to rise to discuss the bill, but it's really important to me to share some experiences of my own. I have respect for all of my colleagues in this room that have their own viewpoint on end-of-life care, and I think that's the point. The point is that we all have our choice. And so I've spent the last 20 years specializing in end-of-life care. I know that these decisions are not made lightly. I have had difficult conversations when I tell patients and their families that their disease process is end stage and they have limited time. As a matter of fact, I did that today on my lunch break. None of these decisions are made lightly, and everybody is evaluated to make sure they are not only cognitively intact, but mentally able to make these decisions. The way the law is now, any patient that decides to go this route has to return much further later to have a second evaluation. Many patients at the end stage of a disease can't get into a car and be transported again because of how sick they are, how short of breath they become, whatever symptoms they may have. When you know you have less than 2 weeks left to live, it is hard to imagine having to have another evaluation. So again, this isn't about necessarily what I believe. It is an option that somebody can choose to have or choose not to have. And so I recommend an aye vote, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Stark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill for me
Excuse me, Representative, to the bill.
To the bill, yes. Thank you. This bill for me, or this topic, is actually quite an emotional one for me personally. I had imagined that the majority of us on this floor have had relationships with someone who has passed away, and we've watched them wither before their death, and sometimes wishing for this. I want to tell you two stories that I think I would like you to know about. Last short session, several of you consoled me as a dear friend of mine who used to be my neighbor. He was 98. He came to live with me the last 4 months of his life. And eventually I missed 2 days of session when he died in my household. And he finally made it onto hospice care. It was a long, slow, painful process. But the interesting thing about Johan is there were days that he would hold my hand crying, saying he wanted to die, that he was ready to go. For heaven's sake, he was 98. He was 40 days away from making it to 99. I mean, if you're going to live a good, long life, like, if he wants to go, let him go, right? And almost every time he would share that with me, the next day, he would tell me how happy he was to still be there. The thing is when you're going through these heartbreaking scenarios, and you're going through pain, you're facing death, your decisions do change. And that's why we have waiting periods. And that's why I think waiting periods are important. But as far as determining how long someone has to live, 2 weeks, how do we know that? I want to tell you another story of a friend of mine named Russell. A dozen years ago, he started out, I was his personal trainer. A unique fellow. I'd love to tell you more about him at some point. But over a course of years of being his friend, I found myself as one of the, basically guardians making decisions on his life. And he came down with Guillain-Barré syndrome. And one night I'm there with his one and only other trusted friend at the hospital. And Guillain-Barré syndrome, if you know anything about it, it actually paralyzes you generally from the hands and works its way from your limbs in, eventually paralyzing your whole body. But he had a rare version of this. He had the Fisher variant, which actually started at his head and went down. So the first thing that happened for him is that he went blind. And he also had neuropathy, so his hands shook nonstop. And Russell, he was about 78 at the time. So sitting there with Russell, as this disease paralyzed him more and more, he got to where he couldn't even communicate. And so I'm standing there with my friend Marvin, who introduced us, who was the other guardian in this scenario. And the doctor comes to us and he says, he is in so much pain, I recommend we give him some morphine. He says, I want you to know that there is no way he's going to live till tomorrow either way. And so you have a choice to make. You can choose to have us give him some morphine, not a lethal dose of any sort whatsoever, but just to help his pain because he's in so much pain. But what's going to happen, he says, I need to let you know what's going to happen when we do that. We're going to give him a small dose. It's going to ease his pain, but he is so weak that he's going to stop breathing shortly afterward. He says, but remember, he can either suffer all night and die by morning, or we can ease his pain and he probably dies in a few minutes. And Marvin and I went out in the hall and we cried and we prayed. If you want to know more about this story, there's another incident outside about a 6-year-old praying about this who somehow knew about it. He didn't know all the details. And Marvin and I decided that we were going to go ahead and say yes. And we came in and we said, give him the morphine, just enough to set him at ease. And lo and behold, Russell fell asleep. And he slept for 3 days. 3 days later, he woke up. And through a series of weeks and even months, full recovery. He's still alive to this day, 12 years later, and has authored 2 more books. A man who science said would not live until morning. Guys, I don't think it is our role as humans to take life or allow life to be taken prematurely I am pro-life, from conception to natural death. And I don't want to make it any easier for any individual in any circumstance to take their life prematurely. Please vote no.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
My mother is in the process of dying with dignity right now. In fact, my mom's been on death's door for almost 2 years. In fact, as soon as the gavel comes down, I'm heading for the location where she is. I think my sister thinks she's waiting for me to get there, but I've received numerous calls in the last year or two that Mom's on death's door and is probably not going to make it very much longer. But my mother always bounces back. She's aged out, and I shouldn't say aged out, whatever you do when you're kicked out of hospice. She's been in and out of a hospice a couple of times because she just didn't die. And for one reason or another, she doesn't seem to be ready to go there yet. I'm at the age now where I've spent a lot of time at bedsides of in-laws and parents and so forth. And you always wonder, when death is going to come. And in almost no case am I ever right. It's always been much longer than I expected. Life is a sacred thing, and I know this is an individual decision that we all have to make, but it is such a precious thing that I'm really concerned when we get to a point where we can shorten down the time span where someone can make a decision based on a bad day. And as my good friend from the Rogue Valley mentioned a moment ago, there's a lot of life left to live after a lot of people think that our time has come. So I would just encourage you to think about this in the moments that we have left, and just think about the fact that people can indeed be manipulated in the process, either by the fact that they've simply had a bad day or two, or someone helps them along to a decision that they just shouldn't be doing. So as we think about this today and consider it, I hope you will come down on the side where you believe that Senate Bill 579 is not right. I advise you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Greenlick, you wish to close? He does.
I do, Mr. Speaker. First of all, to avoid confusion, the advocates for death with dignity support this bill, supported it in testimony. I didn't want any confusion to wander in here. I think we need to ask ourselves, what are we talking about in this bill? We're not talking about changing the basic program, all the safeguards that are in it to make sure that people make the decision in a rational and calm way. What we're talking about is people who are at the very, very end of their life, people with less than 15 days to live. It would be perfect if we could all die clear of mind and free of pain. But the fact is that's not the way it goes. What this bill asks us to do is to allow people to have the dignity of their own decision on the nature of how their death comes about. This is not people who are this close to dying. There's not much motivation for anybody to speed it up. There's not much process left. The process is gone. These are people who are about to die. And what we're asking for in this case is that we not let an artificial time frame get in their way. Colleagues, if people have less than 15 days to live, they shouldn't have to wait 15 days to make the decision that they could make if that wasn't the case. Please vote yes on Senate Bill 579. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, colleagues, for the thoughtful and considered conversation. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Reschke? Reschke votes no. Senate Bill 579, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. And the clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 695, relating to promissory notes issued by ports.
The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 695B. Representative McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring you Senate Bill 695. Under current law, promissory notes to Oregon ports are limited to $1 million and a 5-year term in which to pay back the loan. Therein lies a problem. Senate Bill 695 seeks to expand those statutory limits to $10 million and a 10-year term. Oftentimes, ports use promissory notes as a form of a gap loan to get projects started as they wait to receive federally awarded grant dollars. These can be the form of Build It grants, they can be Tiger grants, they can come in many forms, sometimes from the state, but mostly from the feds. And when that happens, they need a little bit of leeway. Senate Bill 695 allows ports more leeway in borrowing and will provide flexibility to pursue economic development opportunities into the future. I urge an aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative, do you wish to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Bosshart Davis votes aye. Representative Drazen votes aye. Representative Hayden votes aye. Representative Helt votes aye. Representative McLean votes aye. Representative Post votes no. Representative Salinas votes aye. Representative Springer votes aye. Senate Bill 695B, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. And the clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 769, relating to the administration of fees in lieu of property taxes assessed against solar projects and prescribing an effective date.
Thank you. The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 769A. Representative Smith Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, Senate Bill 769 comes to you unanimously from your House Revenue Committee with one person absent and one excused, following another unanimous vote in the Senate where 3 were excused. This bill has minimal fiscal impact and no revenue impact. Senate Bill 769 is an administrative fix that does 2 things. It increases the simplicity and efficiency in how payments are collected from solar property owners who use the property tax exemption of payments in lieu of taxes, or PILT. It also requires that owners of solar property annually certify the energy generation capacity of their property in order to ensure the correct level of payment. The payment in lieu of taxes system currently allows owners of solar projects to work with their counties to agree upon a set term of uniform payments instead of paying property taxes. As it is now, the billing process for this program is separate from the regular billing process for property taxes and does not include a means of reporting. With the current system, there is a lack of transparency on these negotiated payments. The bill before you today will align payments from the payment in lieu of taxes program with the general process currently in place for collecting and distributing all other property tax payments. Further, by requiring certification of the energy capacity on these properties, we can ensure that these property owners are paying the right amount. Under Senate Bill 769, the counties will multiply the maximum energy output capacity of solar electricity generation in megawatts by $7,000, and that will be the annual payment for each project to their respective county. This action will level out the amount each facility pays while in operation and bring stability to the revenue stream. This bill brings two small administrative fixes that offer more transparency to the payment in lieu of taxes program. Colleagues, I encourage you to join me in voting yes on Senate Bill 769. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, do you wish to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no, and the clerk will open the voting system. Representative Evans. Evans votes no. Representative McLean. Representative McLean. McLean votes yes. Senate Bill 769A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. And the clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 935, relating to landscape construction and prescribing an effective date.
The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 935B. Representative Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was the bill that we referred back to committee and got the right amendment in that Senator Hurd and I have been working on for quite some time, since 2017. And just to give some context, on February 1st of 2019, the Landscape Contracting Board of Oregon adopted a modified license that allows an applicant with a 1 year of landscape-related experience who passes the laws, rules, and business practices portion of the license exam to perform a limited scope of landscape contractor works on projects not exceeding $5,000 in value. A person with a modified license may not perform a work on drainage, ornamental water features, irrigation, backflow, low voltage lighting, and retaining walls. Senate Bill 935B requires the LCB to issue a modified landscape professional license to an applicant that pays an application fee. Licensed construction contractors may not obtain a modified landscape professional license. The modified license is not subject to experience and examination requirements. Holders of a modified license may not install or maintain decks attached to a dwelling, make connections to an irrigation system or electrical source or water supply, or design and install an irrigation system over a specified size. The measure allows the LCB to further restrict the scope of the work performed by the modified landscape professional license holders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Hernandez, you wish to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Hayden. Votes aye. Representative Greg Smith. Votes aye. And Representative Solomon. Votes aye. Senate Bill 935B, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. And the clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 944, relating to election audits.
Thank you. The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 944A. Representative Smith Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I am pleased to stand today for the third time today and for our last bill of the day with Senate Bill 944, which comes to you from your House Rules Committee, where it got 5 aye votes with 2 excused and also passed the Senate 26-2. Under current law, after each general election, county clerks must conduct a sample hand count of ballots, called a fixed percentage audit, and compare the results with the results from the vote tally system. Then, if there is a big enough difference between the two, follow-up counts are required. If a disparity continues, all the ballots must be counted by hand, and it is the result of that hand count that is ultimately certified. However, there is not statistical evidence that fixed percentage audits correctly identify the results of an election. While fixed percentage counts were considered best practice when Oregon began requiring that in 2007, there is a newer system that is statistically proven to better align with the actual election results. This system is called a risk limiting audit, or RLA. RLAs are currently being used in Colorado, Rhode Island, Virginia, Ohio, Washington, and California. Senate Bill 944 allows county clerks to either continue the existing system of a fixed percentage audit and also gives them the option to instead use a risk-limiting audit. In an RLA, the hand count of votes can stop when there's enough evidence that the reported vote count is correct. The number counted depends on several factors, including margin of victory, number of errors observed during the vote count, the particular RLA method being used, and others. Oregon is a national player in voter access, from vote by mail to automatic registration. However, there are still some further ways in which we can shore up the security of our elections by boosting the power of our auditing processes, and Senate Bill 944 offers us that opportunity. This requirement will help protect the integrity of vote counts here in Oregon by giving county clerks the option to use an audit system that has become best practice in other states. County clerks are supportive of offering this option, so colleagues, I urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, do you wish to close? She does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Barker. Votes aye. Representative Drazen. Votes no. Representative Kenny Guyer. Votes aye. Representative Greg Smith. Votes aye. Representative Springer. Votes aye. Senate Bill 944A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Chair requests unanimous consent that the rules be suspended to temporarily return to the order of business of first reading of memorials and resolutions. Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 37, recognizing and honoring Keenan Lowe for his brave and selfless actions at Park Rose High School.
Measure read first time is passed to the Speaker's desk for referral. The Chair requests unanimous consent that the rules be suspended to temporarily return to the order of business of first reading of Senate bills. Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Senate Bill 224, relating to elections and prescribing an effective day. Senate Bill 451, relating to eligibility for renewable energy certificates. Senate Bill 998, relating to violations.
Thank you. Bills read first time are passed to the Speaker's desk for referral. And colleagues will stand at ease for just a moment.
bring the House back to order. The chair requests unanimous consent to suspend the rules to read Senate Bill 1052 and be read a third time and to consider it immediately. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 1052, relating to government oversight.
The question now arises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 1052. Representative Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, Senate Bill 1052 modifies laws relating to audits. The bill updates statutes to reflect current and desired practices relating to the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, including further outlining work that may be assigned to legislative staff. The bill also specifies processes and communication between the legislature and the Secretary of State Division of Audits regarding audit plans, performance audits, and an audit follow-up reports to better ensure coordination. Performance audit objectives are detailed and aligned with national audit standards and with the type of information desired by the legislature. In addition, new requirements are added that require information related to agency actions or plans that are the result of audit findings and recommendations to be included in or accompany the governor's budget. Colleagues, your Joint Legislative Audits Committee recommends approval of Senate Bill 1052. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion, Representative Susan McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was fortunate enough to be on the Audit Committee as a co-chair for 2 years, not including this session. And this work is some work that we've been working on very, very strongly to try and make sure that our audit functions are really top-notch, and that not only do we do audits, but that we read the audits and we use those audits to really inform our decisions on budget making and on policy making and other issues as we review our programs, review our agencies, and review the different departments that we have at the state level. I am very pleased, and I really want to thank the Audit Committee for following through with that work and finishing up what we started 2 years ago. It's really a good strategy to make sure that we're getting the very best out of all of our programs, out of all of our budgets, and out of all the FTE that we have at the state level to provide services to the people of Oregon. So thanks again to the Audit Committee and to the co-chairs.
Further discussion? Representative Susan McLean, I don't think you're in the queue again. Thank you. Seeing none, Representative Greg Smith, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to echo the comments from the good representative from Western Washington County. She teed this up very, very well, and because of her work and leadership, we are where we are today. I'd also like to acknowledge the very fine work from LFO. Thank you for all that you've done, and I would encourage an aye vote.
Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Prusak, how do you vote? Prusak votes aye. Senate Bill 1052, having received the Constitutional majority, is declared passed. Other business of the House. Orders of the day have been completed. Announcements. Adjournment, jumped ahead there. Remonstrances. Representative Gomberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, when I first came to the House in the early 1980s as a young staffer, my best friend here was Dennis Coho. Now, I'll tell you that Dennis had taken it very hard when his brother was killed in Vietnam, and for about 10 years he suffered from alcoholism, but he eventually overcame that addiction. He worked here as the chief of staff for the Senate Majority Leader. And we would spend our days here talking politics, and then we'd spend our evenings over at the Ram Pub putting quarters in the Pac-Man machine. You know, politics and Pac-Man. In hindsight, that seems ironic. Dennis stood up for me at my wedding. We were good friends. And after his time here, he went on to become the mayor of Kaiser. Where he worked very hard to bring the Volcanoes baseball team here. At age 50, he decided to change his life. He went to law school, and he opened up his own law practice, where he mentored young attorneys and then also took time to counsel young people who were suffering some of the same kinds of addictions and challenges that he had as a young man. Dennis came to visit me here in the Capitol a couple of weeks ago. He was recovering from a heart attack and a stroke, and he was a little bit stooped. He walked with a cane. He carried a tank of oxygen with him, but he still had that glint in his eye, and he told me he wanted to return to me a gift that I had given him on Valentine's Day in 1983. And I had to scratch my head a little bit, but he pulled out of his pocket a little candy heart, you know, the kind that have an affectionate sediment on them, except that I had scraped the words off and written something less poetic on the candy and given it to him. And he had kept it for some 40 years and wanted to give it back to me. And we laughed until we cried, Mr. Speaker. So Dennis Coho, 3-term mayor of Kaiser, father of the Volcanoes, a lawyer, a mentor, a counselor, and a good friend, passed away last week. And his mass was held this morning while we were in session here. I thought a lot about him during those hours. Dennis Coho made his community better. He helped people, colleagues, and he will be missed and he will be remembered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further remonstrances, Representative Bossart Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to read an article that was just dropped 3 hours ago. Fort George Brewery faces backlash over cap and trade bill. Fort George Brewery is facing a local backlash over co-owner Jack Harris's support of a controversial state House Bill 2020. Harris submitted a letter on behalf of Fort George in February in favor of the Clean Energy Jobs Bill, which would cap carbon emissions and require large industrial facilities, such as Georgia Pacific's Wanna Mill, to buy pollution allowances if they exceed the cap. The bill, an attempt to counter climate change, passed the House on Monday night and now goes to the state Senate. Fort Georgia's association with the bill led to a social media firestorm over the weekend after the Silver Salmon Grill announced on Facebook it would boycott the brewery's products. The Astoria restaurant said it was standing behind truckers in the timber industry. The Uptown Cafe in Warrenton posted on Facebook that the restaurant would also stop serving Fort George beers. Harris said he asked that his letter be removed from the official record. He also said he is apologizing to his coworkers. Fort George is no longer listed as a member of Oregon Business for Climate, a group of around 100 medium and large businesses advocating for the bill. I was completely out of line, Harris said. I broke company policy. I did not have the right to speak for Fort George's 160 employees, let alone my business partner. Oregon Business for Climate includes some of the state's most popular business interests. But the backlash against Fort George and the brewery's swift retreat shows how fraught it can be for businesses to get involved. Trade-exposed businesses like the Wanna Mill would receive free allowances the first year, but would pay an estimated $123,000 worth of allowances in 2022, with the expense increasing as the pollution cap lowers. Opponents argue the pollution caps will raise energy prices, create a competitive disadvantage, and cause companies to relocate, all while doing little to address climate change. A state analysis found lowering carbon emission caps would raise gasoline prices 22 cents a gallon by 2021 and $3 a gallon by 2050. The United Steelworkers, a union representing more than 600 workers at the Wanna Mill, has raised fears the mill could close or relocate outside Oregon if the bill passes. Thank you, colleagues.
Further remonstrances, Representative Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, last Thursday, we passed some landmark legislation on the floor of this House in HCR 20 and House Bill 3377, dealing with a culture in the Capitol that's been well publicized, and that many of us, and I would specify actually you in here, have experienced. Something that was, it was time. So much that when my daughter came to work for me last year, I had to warn her that if anybody had touched her inappropriately or made any appropriate comments, that she needed to talk to me. Similar to the speech I gave her when she first entered junior high school. I'm very happy that that's not the case here. However, the two bills we dealt with, or the resolution and the bill we dealt with last week, really dealt with freedom of speech versus inappropriate conduct. And again, it was a very appropriate way to deal with internal issues. There's one thing we haven't dealt with, and that's criminal conduct. Specifically sexual harassment that consists of touching the sexual or other intimate parts of the other person, which is currently in statute and is a misdemeanor. We all know that sexual harassment is not about sex. It's about power. The Me Too movement, the behavior in this building, just reaffirms that there is a power gap, and there's a power gap here. As much as I don't like that, I have to understand that there is a certain responsibility that goes with being an elected official. So I'd like to introduce you to House Bill 3411. House Bill 3411 requires the reporting of physical sexual harassment by legislative officials and registered lobbyists and specifies procedures for that reporting. It creates a crime of false reporting of harassment. It creates a crime of unlawful interference with a harassment investigation. And then it provides that public servants who commit the crime of official misconduct in the that engage in this conduct also commit the crime of official misconduct in the first degree if the person knowingly harasses another by subjecting that person to offensive physical contact involving the touching of sexual or intimate body parts. There was a delay in drafting House Bill 3411, which then allowed or actually caused this bill to be dropped right towards the end of the first chamber deadline. Not getting a hearing, that happens. However, I'm bringing this to your attention today because tomorrow I plan to pull this bill to the floor because I think it's something we need to consider and how we expect our behavior to be treated at or above what we would expect the citizens of this state. Offensive physical contact when it involves touching, which I think was potentially part of the Bully report, needs to be dealt with, and we need to hold ourselves accountable. Thank you, colleagues.
Further remonstrances? Representative Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Speaker. And this is on a little bit lighter note. Last Saturday morning, Representative Peluso and Gorsuch and I had the joy of attending Mount Hood Community College graduation, and it was over 2,000 people attended. I want to read just one paragraph from the president's remarks because I think it helps capture just a little bit of who these people are that graduate from our schools. And we were the three representatives. I tried to get them to do this in three-part harmony, but they said something about House rules not allowing that. So I'll just go ahead and read this. It was a joke. Class of 2019, you are among more than 1 million students who chose Mount Hood Community College as their college. Class of 2019, you are an incredible group. The youngest of you is 16, and the oldest is 67. 48 of you are veterans. Thank you for your service. And 35% of you are the first in your family to graduate from college. This was their 52nd graduation, and it was a proud moment in their history. And I mention it because I'm really delighted that we were able to improve the funding situation for community colleges so that more of our young people between the ages of 16 and 67 can go on and have a successful life. Thank you.
Further remonstrances? Adjournment. Representative Greg Smith, 10 a.m. Wednesday, June 19th, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I move we adjourn until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, June 19th, 2019.
Representative Greg Smith moves the House adjourn until 10 a.m. Wednesday, June 19th, 2019. Without objection, the House is adjourned.